Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On November 3rd, I asked the following question in this House. I rise in the House once again to ask the Minister of Natural Resources about his plans to stop the pine beetle from attacking our forests, Canadian forests. Last year alone, the beetle increased tenfold. Even though science and research had been done, the beetle has moved from Jasper Park into central Alberta and is heading east. All of Canada's pine forests are at risk. We need financial assistance to cull the trees. What is this Liberal government doing to stop this infestation? Again, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to ask a similar question. When is this Liberal government going to step up to the plate? Last week, we received an answer that they were doing science and research. I rise again today to say that science and research is not applicable at this time. Why? We know all about the pine beetle. Science and research has been done for many years. I was there when the pine beetle was first spotted in western British Columbia in the late 1970s. If proper action would have been taken then, the trees culled or burnt, I probably wouldn't be asking the question again today. Our boreal forests are at risk. What is needed from this minister is financial aid. Even the former Liberal government in 2005 recognized the problem and gave $100 million to fight the pine beetle when it was still in British Columbia. Did science and research stop it? No. Did we stop the pine beetle? No. The government of Alberta has spent over $85 million to fight the infestation, and that funding helped slow the pine beetle up until this year, Mr. Speaker. This is a drop in bucket compared to $9 billion in damages, fighting costs, and loss of production in the fire in Fort McMurray, and caused untold millions that it will cost to fight the BC fires this last year. Those fires were fed by dead pine forests due to the pine beetle. Our previous Conservative government gave $10 million in 2009 to fight the pine beetle in northwestern Alberta. The Fort McMurray fire last year helped destroy a large amount of the northern pine beetle, but unfortunately, it destroyed a lot more than that, Mr. Speaker, and I think we all saw that on the news. You know, Mr. Speaker, I remember going to a pine beetle seminar where scientists told me that the pine beetle would never get across the Rocky Mountains. Well, they're gone way across. During the adjournment debate on October 26th, I once again called upon the federal government to assist Alberta in the fight against the mountain pine beetle. Companies like Weyerhaeuser, Miller Western, West Fraser have spent millions of dollars of their own money to fight and combat the pine beetle. I have held meetings and roundtable discussions, parks officials, CFS officials, as well as representatives from forestry and local communities. Parks Canada kept telling us they were going to try and cull the trees. Very little was done. What do we need? The Minister of Forestry and Agriculture from the province of Alberta told me 10 days ago they need financial help. Mr. Speaker, we need financial assistance now to cull the trees. The beetle killed 40,000 trees last year while we were holding them at bay between the industry and the province, but has increased tenfold to over 500,000 this year. The pine beetle is out of control. Again, what is the Minister of Natural Resources going to do to stop the pine beetle from attacking our forests? We have and must move faster than the pine beetle before it's too late for all of Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member from Yellowhead for his dedication to this important issue affecting the forest sector in his riding and across the country. And certainly as a MP from BC, I empathize. It's a very serious, serious situation. I would like to reassure him, as our government has last week and the week before when this question has come up in the House, that we are doing everything we possibly can to stop this infestation from spreading. Unfortunately, climate change has made once inhospitable forests and climates more inviting to the mountain pine beetle and other destructive forest pests. Natural dispersal is allowing them to spread with alarming speed, creating a real threat to forest-dependent communities across Canada. The member for Yellowhead has seen the impact and the extent of the problem in his own riding. And sadly, the situation is not unique to Alberta's pine forests. That's why our government has invested an additional $87 million in scientific infrastructure upgrades. That includes federal labs conducting research that informs our responses to destructive forest pests, such as the pine beetle. This new funding is critical to the Canadian Forest Service, which employs Canada's largest team of scientists devoted to pest management. The Forest Service is a recognized centre of excellence on pests and invests $20 million annually to develop scientific solutions that help forest managers and communities respond to damaging pests by slowing their spread, mitigating their impact, and reducing the risk of infestation in areas not yet affected. Over the last 2 years alone, the Forest Service has spent $1.3 million supporting mountain pine beetle research. Through these efforts, we've been able to assess the economic and environmental risks associated with these forest pests, particularly under a changing climate, and help adaptive options for affected communities and industry. All of this is vitally important as we work toward our ultimate goal, which is to contain the pine beetle spread. We've also assisted in maximizing value from beetle-killed timber, as well as developing new technologies and products. For example, our research has helped the forest sector adapt its practices, to use the effective wood in traditional manufacturing mills, as well as alternative product markets such as panel board manufacturing and wood biomass recovery. Nor are we doing any of this alone, Mr. Speaker. Yellowhead is a case in point. The Canadian Forest Service is working closely with industry, provincial government agencies, and Parks Canada to develop science-based responses under the National Forest Pest Strategy. This means developing and implementing cooperative management strategies informed by science to mitigate the infestation and spread of mountain pine beetle at the regional level. The Canadian Forest Service, the provinces, industry, and our other partners are fully engaged on this. We are all working together to protect the economic value of provincial forests and preserve the ecological integrity of national and provincial parks. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Yellowhead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the honourable member Cross for her reply, but I think it's a lot of bull. Science and technology has not stopped the beetle. If you're looking for integrity of your parks, just take a drive through Jasper Park and take a look at all the brown dead trees. From the BC border through to the Alberta border, your science and technology couldn't even stop it within a confined area of the park, and you say you're doing a lot. Put some money to help the province of Alberta fight the pine beetle situation. Your previous government gave $100 million. Our previous government gave. Alberta needs help right now. They cannot afford to do it on their own. Science has not stopped the pine beetle. Actual culling or burning will stop the pine beetle. We're asking you for financial assistance to stop it before it gets further east. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Just remind the honourable member to direct speech towards the chair. We try to avoid using the you word in a direct fashion that way. The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand and empathize with the member opposite's frustration with the mountain pine beetle. It's chewing into a forest sector that employs more than 200,000 Canadians and contributes more than $23 billion a year to our GDP. In fact, our forest industry provides more jobs, dollar for dollar, than any other resource sector. This is why our government is seized with protecting Canada's forests and the men and women and communities that depend upon them. Through the Canadian Forest Service, we have some of our country's brightest minds developing innovative solutions for these infestations, including the one devastating Western Canada's pine forests. Together, I believe we will meet this challenge. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.